So with our handsome Mr. Zeus, good job, sir. We were just warming up earlier with a little bit of play, and then we'll do a couple little find-its to get in the groove. I love his new little bow tie. It looks really nice on him with his matching blue sweater. Good job, sir. So for Mr. Z, I know you guys had mentioned that he is still struggling at times with some hellos with family members or friends or neighbors. So a lot of times too, when you're dealing with an adolescent, as we've discussed, their brain and their bodies are not fully mature developing. And at times that means that when they feel things, they sometimes go into it like 110%. There could also be some over arousal going on, and that's again not sexual. That is your dog getting so jazzed they almost can't function. So if you're finding that he's really struggling with certain setups, it can be immensely helpful to, I know not always do we know when someone's about to poke in or come visit. I do believe you mentioned that you have gates and sort of a zone where he could hang out in before you do want to bring him into the mix. So I would highly recommend, when you are unable to work on the situation, is to manage the situation. Nice job, sir. So let's say, for example, while I'm blabbing, he might work a little bit with his stay, and we'll practice some of this place behavior while I'm discussing some of these proper hellos. So when it comes to Mr. Z, just like with most dogs, hellos can be really exciting. They can be a little trail mix of emotions where they're excited but then a little unsure. Remember, anything that's novel can sometimes create those scenarios. A lot of times too is, as he's practicing, we tend to not always do the same setup when we enter the environment. So if we tend to heavily reinforce the dog as they come into our space and they're really excited and they're jumping and maybe mouthing, we may find that even though we might love the hello, it could also confuse the dog, thinking that every new thing that pops in might enjoy the same greeting. So this doesn't mean I don't allow my dogs to visit, come say hi. I even have my guy hop up, so he jumps up and I go and love him up. I do tend to recommend folks, and don't mind me, I'm going to grab a quick cough drop, not dog treat. Dealing with a little bit of a cold, which has been really exciting, so a little tickly throat. But when we're working with our beauties, remember that whatever they are able to rehearse with one person, they might potentially think everybody's going to also enjoy it. So with one of my guys, since he does like to hop up, he does sometimes try to give the same greeting to everybody. So I do recommend, try to set it up where maybe you have a cue for hopping up, or you have a cue for going and visiting, or whatever little dynamic you prefer. This does not mean I'm going to be scolding or yelling at them for being excited to go see something or someone. We don't want to get rid of the dog's curiosity or the dog's likelihood to think that new things could be safe and fun by scolding them, even when they are at times giving us a little bit of a harder moment at that scenario. So for Mr. Z, like right now, we did a little bit of play. We're working a bit with our place behavior. Obviously, if someone came walking in right now, I'm pretty sure he would also get up and be very excited and a little overwhelmed. So remember that sometimes what looks like, and he maybe has to have a drink, which is fine. So let's say your babe tends to, when they get excited, they might actually get more mouthy, more jumpy. Oh, good, he's grabbing a chew. Zeusy, you want to bring it over here on your bed? So if, for example, your babe is struggling with something and you can't help them, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, make sure to include management. So if in the beginning, okay, company's coming over, you had no idea, at least have a safe spot where Mr. Z could go in and hang out there with maybe some chew items or something like a puzzle toy. The other option too would be, I know we've discussed a little bit with some of those pattern games. We may find using sometimes target bowls and then working a little bit with getting him to target certain zones as the company's coming in, and that gives him his ability to diffuse some of that energy onto the other option. Obviously, having novel chews that he hasn't seen all day could be another great venue for redirection. The wilds are wrestling. But if, let's say, for example, he's not doing well, creating more space is always your better bet. So even though people would love to touch him, and I know you do allow for a little decompression time before he does go and engage, a lot of times, though, if they're just behind a buffer and they don't know what to do with themselves, they might actually just be revving at the edge of that barrier and maybe even getting more frustrated. So I'm not saying to allow him to go pummel company sweetly, but it might be one of those situations where, okay, we know he's going to get very excited in the very beginning. we're going to let him diffuse while maybe one of us is working with him as the friends come in. And then that way he has find it's. He could work some puppy push-ups. He could work a bit with his place behavior. He could also redirect onto choose, lick items or toys. And then maybe we could take some of the energy and funnel it into something better. So if, for example, find it's in food are not working, then that means his excitement or over-arousal or anxiety, whatever it might be, would be too high for him to even be functional through that setup. So even though he eventually, maybe after 10, 15 minutes or whatever it might be for the time frame, does then simmer down, those 5 to 10 minutes that he's practicing that behavior, he's then going to be really good at thinking that's part of the hello. So it would be maybe one of those things where if we don't love what he's rehearsing, how can we either prevent the rehearsal, but also how do we redirect him onto a better option? And then sometimes maybe he doesn't get to do all the hellos right then and there when he was very excitable, but instead maybe 5, 10, 20 minutes in, when everybody's very situated and comfortable, then we work a few skills. Ready, Zeus? This is a delicious snack. So if for right now, let's say having a brand new chew could be another venue, remember that you're not trying to avoid a setup. It's just if he doesn't always have the refinement or the capabilities for doing something, constantly asking him to simmer while he's kind of fizzling over may not be a good setup for him or for you. So we may try and work a little bit, obviously, with him working some more of these place behaviors, work a little bit with maybe there's some excitement. So we might see his friends doing something, he has to hold back. So I would recommend to practice with household family members and don't wait for the company to come to then rehearse these skills, but maybe practice throughout the week. Okay, I'm going to be coming home. I'm going to have my spouse ask the dog to work these skills. As I come in, he might be excited, but we're going to take that excitement and redirect it into the things we'd like him to get better at for the next time someone else comes to visit. Ready, Zeusy? Want to do a little find it? He says, I don't know. I really like the stinky hoof. So when practicing with our handsome guy, I know you mentioned find it's weren't working so well. So if the food is kind of out the window, then probably so's the learning, like I mentioned a few moments earlier. We may find for him, just like with most youngsters, some energy burning prior to an event can be helpful too. Nice job, sir. So if, let's say, for example, you know you're going to have company over, you may preemptively work him, go for some practice around the yard, maybe go to a sniffspot.com or an open environment like a parking lot and practice some loop-de-loops or loose leash walking with some practice that he enjoys too, like sniff walks. Remember though, overtired dog or pup can still actually be more problematic because of the fact that they're now so overtired, they don't have enough fuel to kind of help them through those hardships that could be new company. Huh, Zeusy? Like, it's delicious. So let's say, for example, though, we're going to take a little break from this chew. Remember to keep implementing like the treat and retreat game, the toy exchange game where you're kind of swapping between multiple toys so that letting go again has value. If again, all I did was take it out of his mouth, then technically every time I come near, I may be the end of the game or the end of the fun. And I don't want Mr. Z to think every time I come near, then I become the end of the enjoyment, be it his chew or tuggy or whatever he's playing with. So I might go ahead, I'm going to practice a little bit while he's working just a little bit on his mat, is a bit with the treat and retreat for a moment, and we can dive into some more of those little tidbits that we were discussing earlier. So let's say, again, your puppy's enjoying a chew. The reason I recommend to do the treat and retreat is that you're just making it seem benign that when you come nearby, you have actually made it better than it once was. So for a lot of puppies and teenagers, you might have thought for a little while they were doing really well with their, for example, take it and drop it exercises, or even exchanging of items, or maybe even leave it's down the road. But remember that if eventually it starts to build up where every time we come near, we take the acorn, we take the stick, we take the whatever, the puppy might start to do, of course, keep away, where they're almost like the gingerbread man, again, you'll never catch me now, and they might bolt with that item, be it a household item or a shoe or whatever. Nice, great little check-in. So right there, I'm going to feed him for that. I'm a smart boy. So as I'm just meandering, I'm just feeding this handsome guy for sometimes noticing me versus the chew. I'm also just feeding him in the moment while he's enjoying something. So I become, again, kind of like the extra topping lady for your ice cream. So if, let's say, every time your ice cream started to get depleted because you've eaten all of its cool toppings, I am now that lady coming by with extra sprinkles or whatever you'd like to, fudge or maybe gummy worms to put on your ice cream. So me coming near isn't bad, but instead the bringer of some good. So eventually, after you've been doing the treat and retreat, which is where you toss food and you walk away, you could then start to implement find it or even name recognition with him bouncing back and forth between the item and then off to the side one way or the other. So we might go, Zeus, ready? See if I can get his attention. We'll do a little find it. So again, I'm not stealing the item away. It's still staying there, but I'm helping him realize that getting up and moving is no big deal. Nice. Or a smart boy. So this way, when you start to practice with your babes, throughout the week here and there, you may find that you could do an easy exchange for one toy to another, and that's a great way to disengage, even if it wasn't the appropriate toy from our perspective. So again, we might go, ready, Zeus? Find it. And we'll see if you can get up and wiggle again. Nice. So let's say I did want to take a break from the hoof, or I wanted him to work a few other skills. This is where redirecting him onto a few of these little find it's prior doesn't mean that every time I've done, let's say, a food exchange that I've taken the item. If it tends to be, here's this treat, and then I take your really cool prized possession, the next time you might come over with a snack, he might still romp away because it tends to equal you're taking the prized item away once more. So right here, again, we're just meandering. I might try for this one. Ready, Zeus? Ready? Find it. Well, nice little, again, find it off to the side. We might save this disgusting hoof for another time. I'm just going to plop it up on the shelf so it's out of range just for a moment. That way we can work a few more little skills and we can come back to the chew. So nice job. Ready? So for taking a little breather, I might do another little find it over on his bed. His little peanut butter snacks, I'm also breaking up into little tidbits. Those ones were some bigger ones that I didn't get to break up yet. Ready? So maybe what we'd like to work on is a little bit with engagement to me. Sorry, my hoodie gets in the way a little bit. And so we're going to just warm up a little bit of ready, loose leash walking. So a lot of times too is if you're having a challenging moment with your puppy, we're just going to use it like an obstacle course. Ready? Nice job. So if you're having a really hard time with your babe, and let's say, for example, they are really struggling when people come in, a lot of times we assume stationary is going to help because the dog can't move forward to go towards that thing. The problem with being stationary, though, for a lot of dogs and puppies is that being stationary makes you feel more frustrated or more trapped or more unable to get to the thing you want. So it does create more of this barrier frustration at times. So that could happen because of a leash, a baby gate, a fence. It could also be like, different sections that create almost this feeling of feeling stuck behind a barrier. So with Mr. Z, what I would recommend is when in doubt, keep him moving. So even though he might be in another section of the home with you and here comes company, you could help him by walking up and down your hallway. Maybe then as he gets more involved with you, nice job, sir, then you could start to implement a few other training skills that he maybe knows under his belt as that comfort range builds. So you could go, ready, Zeus, front. He's like, I'm hoping you threw the food. Nice. So if we're moving into my space, I'm going to feed him for coming into my space for now. It doesn't have to be, for example, a pristine, gorgeous sitting front. The main goal, especially if we're dealing with behavior in the beginning, is I just want him to think that there's, he says, I dropped that one, is I just want him to think there's value in moving from one space into another. Ready? He's like, lady, I just really want you to throw them all. Zeusy is right here. Okay, you found a crumb. Good job. Zeus. So we could bring him into a little bit of our front. Nice. Good job. And then we might sneak him back over to the side position again. He's like, I guess so. He's such a big boy. Nice job. It's a lot of dog to move around, and to make in that little circle. Are you getting tired? He's thinking about going for another drink, I think. So when practicing with your gorgeous guy, I would recommend think about, have we rehearsed the skills we'd like him to do with us before those other folks come over, or family or friends or whatever it might be. He says, another chew toy. I did bring out a few chews just in case for the handsome man. So if, again, we haven't rehearsed what we want to work on, make sure to practice prior. If, again, stationary positions are not going as well, think movement when in doubt. And then also try to implement potentially a little bit with some of those pattern games. So I know he really liked the Super Bowls game that I did with those little mats out on the floor. You could do it with, again, easy peasy, like little dishes. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. For some folks, they might even have already like little targets that they can use. Go ahead, sir. And then that might be another great way to build in, let's do this while this other thing might be happening off in the distance. And because pattern games stay consistent, even as the environment changes, sorry, tickle again, is then you might be setting them up for greater success for down the road, because even though the environment is always changing, the patterns stay consistent. So, but maybe we'll give Mr. Z a little breather. He says this is delicious, and we'll take a little break. I'm so sorry about my coughing.